Welcome, Shinpei.
Hi, great to be here.
So excited to have you. I love it that I love that I'm getting to see you and to talk to you on our very first and inaugural moment here.
Great.
I'd love to kick us off. Just tell me more about you. Who's Shinpei? and
Let's
just
yeah, let's
you know,
let's keep it super broad.
absolutely wherever you want to go.
Um, um, Maybe the best way of describing me is I kind of I've always been a bit of an outsider. We were immigrants to the U.S. and I was just thinking about my work, and now I'm at Uber, but I feel that I've spent the majority of my professional life kind of working from the outside in, trying to influence change from the outside, really kind of figuring out how to find a voice in that, and also feeling very passionate about helping other people find voices in that. And so I think that's been a central part of my work, and it has always been focused on, that the spaces around us, starting with design, but ultimately landing in policy, because that's how we make those spaces stay more permanent in a way, and scale. So I think that's a bit of an introduction to me.
Yeah. No, I love kind of what you said, that you came from an immigrant background. I did as well. My family and I came to the States in 91. And I love also kind of seeing how that experience connects to the work that you do today. Because I think there's so much to be said around how outsiders, to your point, are able to connect inward, and inward being into the spaces they're in, and inward into their own individual kind of selves, and really make an interesting sort of connection. Because I think when you're in a space, when you're in a country, when you're in a city, and you don't necessarily see the things from the outside in. So it's really exciting to have you and to have your perspectives. And tell me a bit more about that experience. I'd love to learn, I'd love to know, how did you grow up? So you came, how old were you when you came to the
Yeah,
States? What
we
was
were
that like?
3. We immigrated from Taiwan. I was 3. We immigrated from Taiwan, and a couple of things that just really has stayed with me from that experience. I have to say, the immigration process, landing at the airport, people were so welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something I always remember, that there was this ethos of being welcoming, and that was, to me, part of what being in the United States was about.
Mm-hmm.
That people could find a bit of refuge here,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that, whatever they were kind of moving from, there was some haven to be found. Not heaven, haven.
Mm-hmm.
And then my parents ultimately, I spent the majority of my time in Syracuse, which in very suburban setting, on a cul-de-sac, where it was frankly very lonely. The domestic experience, let's say, the home experience, was very lonely. Immigrants weren't necessarily so welcome in the city, and getting around was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really kind of sparked my interest when I finally got myself to a city where it was the first time where you could be surrounded by people, but remain anonymous, that you were sharing things but had your own space. It was like a lot of the things that I just really kind of missed and didn't know I missed, growing up the way I did,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of made me fall in love with cities, and just the diversity, even the messiness, people being people. I just really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed all of that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's interesting, just again to your point, um, you seeing the infrastructure, you're seeing the thing that's working for you and that's not working for you, being kind of an outsider but an insider at the same time. Now, I mean, what are you finding in terms of your work right now? What's most present for you? I mean, we've just evolved from this year-long, quote unquote, hibernation process where we've been slightly desensitized in the sense of, not using our 5 senses to be human in a way. We're using maybe 3 of the 5. And I'm just really interested in what's top of mind. What are you thinking about? Whether work or personal?
Yeah, I bet everyone's overthinking the situation in so many ways. Yeah, I mean, it's on all different levels too, right? Like first, how you've had to adjust so much, your life really changed. We're like mandated behavioral change for you, your network, your immediate social network, maybe your family, and then I know broader neighborhood, and then society, and I think it's obviously even beyond COVID. There was the George Floyd protests and how that all came to a fore, um, shelter in place policies revealing just how stark our inequities are and how much privilege and frankly rampant privilege people have, and just how really challenging it is. So there's that side of it for sure, but there's also not exactly a silver lining, but people really come together sometimes in these moments, right? Like the mutual aid groups that emerged were incredible. It's a shame that there was even a gap. But people really did come together. The transformation of streets across cities around the world to take this moment when there isn't as much conventional traffic, to rethink the way that we're using space and how we're sharing space. And now that outdoor space is so precious and air is so precious for our health and for our mental health.
Yeah.
How can we kind of create more of it and claw back some of that space that we've given over to other uses that maybe we shouldn't be prioritizing? So I think there's a lot that we can kind of look back to as it's been more than a year, right? It's like more than a pilot, right? Of time, and the people's tolerance and resilience is just incredible.
Absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. We've been thinking a lot about um, the understanding and the difference between space and place, and what does it mean for cities to be designed in a different way, for our spaces to be designed and have a different function and purpose and what we use them for, and also thinking about well-being, right? And how does that all kind of contribute to our health and ability to do what we do on a daily basis, whatever that might be. And I'm also super curious, for you, even during this time or in general, what's been where have you found that you do your most innovative or creative work? Whether it's a space or place in Manhattan or at the beach.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just in like time, I find I'm most focused in the morning, and I kind of try to create space in the afternoons to really kind of let my mind wander. But I was just thinking about this a little bit more abstractly, and I feel like I'm most creative when I'm working around the edges. I feel like we can get really sucked into like what we don't have and what we can't do and what what we're sort of boxed into. And if you kind of can peer around the edges and take a look around those things, and maybe even have some curiosity about like why it is that the way it is, that's where I feel like I can find some creativity and find some energy and find some motivation to reorganize and reprioritize and just think differently and arrive at different conclusions or ideas for the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. How do you get to those edges? How do you get from like the inside to the outside?
Yeah, good question. This is an ongoing process for me. I was, being at a tech company was such a huge change for me. I worked in the nonprofit space for like 20 years, and so now I'm in the tech space. And it's also the largest company I've ever worked for. It's upwards of 20,000 people now, and so it's really easy to be working in service of everyone else that needs you in the space like this, right? There's a lot of demand in your time. There's a lot of little tasks, and I've just been in this process of trying to understand, parse out what are those things I need to do in service of other people, which is fine and part of the job? And then what are the things that I need to do in service of, what I believe is sort of right or needs to be done, or in service of the team for ourselves.
Mhm.
And that kind of parsing out, it's not to say other people's priorities aren't priorities. It's more to say this is how you can give yourself a little bit of mental space to then develop a sense of curiosity about maybe things that might feel constraining or frustrating, and wonder, why is it that this is in place? Is there something else going on? Is there something around it? What if we turned it upside down?
Mhm.
And try to get out of the box, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's a bit of a process that started like in the midst of. I mean, it took a long time, but it started in the midst of needing to work from home and all these
Mhm.
changes and adapting to new ways of interacting with people. Realizing that we're probably like working into like a whole bunch of
Mhm.
socially awkward habits, but then really trying to create that space internally for you to
Yeah.
kind of expand. Yeah.
Totally. As you were talking, I mean, the word that kept repeating in my head is white space. Just how do we create that white space, especially when we've got, we're working from home. The day begins and ends with the home, and there's no delineation. I found it personally pretty challenging. And what's funny is over over the course of this past year, our team has grown, and I've also started doing conversations on leading in ambiguity. And it's funny, like I feel like sometimes in these conversations, I'm like, I'm talking about what we're doing, almost as though it's like a meta relationship with like, I'm like, this is, I know I'm doing this, but I feel very particular in the moment that I'm in. Um, and like talking about the moment almost feels like, oh, like we really should give ourselves more credit because we actually are, we're doing the things that we're preaching, but at the same time, um, it doesn't feel like that because we don't have that moment, like that beginning and the ending in the day. So it's
Yeah.
been for me as well, like similar. It's been very it's a moment that I feel like I've had to really be present for, and sometimes it's just very hard to be present. I mean, that's
Oh,
kind of the
yeah,
challenge that I found.
absolutely. I also find like I mean, I moved to San Francisco from New York just
Mhm.
right before the pandemic. Great time
Mhm.
to move to a new place. But have such an appreciation for the natural beauty of the Bay Area, and we don't have a car, so I've had to like really explore on my own on
Mhm.
bicycle,
Mhm.
or just long walks where I allow myself to get a little lost. And it's just, yeah, just have finding that break in a way, whether
Mhm.
it's psychological or physical, or being it's really important right now. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And also I think like finding the humanity in these moments too is like really is also sometimes really hard. I found myself, sometimes being so focused on deadlines and just getting to the thing that we need to get to it so we can move it to the side and move on to the next thing, that you literally like where I've literally like lost track of like the sometimes the human connection aspect of what we do. It's what we do with clients, and at the same time I'm like, how do I how am I not doing this right this moment? Like I really have to take stock. But I'm curious for you. I mean, I know you mentioned connecting with nature and having particular um, ways of delineating kind of work within the team and how you're thinking about the white space and being on the edges. What's been both either this time or in general in your career, like what's been a moment like how you've been working to create more humanity? Like what are some of the like what's um, like the human connection that we're all seeking, it's sort of the connection to each other, to the bigger purpose in what we're doing with our lives. How is that present in your work? Or how have you found that present in your work?
Yeah, I love this question because I feel like um, I really, I really just embrace that possibility constantly. I'm actually really introverted, so it's a little tiring sometimes. But I work also, like I mentioned a couple of things, right? Like design and policy, they sound so devoid of human connection. And what I try to keep in mind is, the ultimate kind of experience that someone will have as a result of design. Who is that person? All these people. But even in policy, when we think about institutions, it's really easy to not, to think of them as abstractions or kind of black and white, or and not recognize that there are people in there also operating under constraints and rules and all sorts of systems and structures. And they're also trying to maintain their sense of being in a way. So as I really try to center that, and especially this past year, but throughout my work, just thinking about people who don't have privilege, who have been systemically marginalized, who and that would be a very kind of forgiving way of describing it, frankly. And in the ways that they, kind of break through, rise to the occasion, are able to find their way. I just think about that a lot, and so I feel like that human connection to me is very resonant on all these different levels. And even just like, talking to people over Zoom, I feel very kind of responsible for being present. It's very, very challenging for an introvert, let me tell you. It's been a very kind of tiring few months, but so I think so important for people to recognize that, and also in yourself, that people, you're trying to be you and they're trying to be them, and and everyone's at different stages of that actualization and of figuring that out for themselves.
Totally. And I also think, the work that you do is so important because, well, in a lot of ways, I mean, the human connection comes from the point that you are basically designing and thinking, whether it's policy or design or both, for the end user, which is the citizen, the person in the city that is going to be using or using transportation and or just moving around in whatever ways the most practical. So I feel like the idea of movement in and of itself and the ability to move is already sort of this privilege that we have. And then thinking about all of the infrastructures and the ecosystems that need to shift as a result of some of the conversations that you just mentioned on equity and kind of.
I know. I mean, I think in transportation policy particularly, there's this real judgment placed on people who just historically have not had access to transportation choices. And there's it's the only field I can think of where it's like they need to come over towards us in, let's say, sustainable transportation. We need to make everyone cycle more. But that's, if you can embrace and have that empathy and embrace, like, let's think through, like, what are they facing? It can shift where you might, start and what sort of solutions you might offer.
Totally. No, I mean, we can go on for hours on this particular, I love this particular topic specifically, but I want to move us to our kind of rapid fire where we're going to do our last 5 questions in a quicker way. So, quick question for you. When do you feel most connected to others?
In conversation.
What intersection of disciplines are you currently most fascinated by?
I'm always curious about intersections with geography. So like human geography, economic geography, those things are really fascinating to me.
Who's had the biggest impact on you?
My piano teacher, who showed me that, we were lovable in spite of being outsiders.
Oh, I love that. What is your greatest regret?
I try not to have regrets.
I love it. What's the one thing you wish to pass down to the next generation?
Say something lofty, like, think of the earth and people around you, but be yourself and know that others are trying to do that too.
Awesome. And what is your current state of mind?
I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Let's talk about being present, right? We're together. Yes. Well, we're at our 20-minute mark, Shin-pei, so it's been so great to have you. And thank you for being our first guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.